there is daily fear coursing through this city.
If it was happening in another country, we would not hesitate for a single second to call it autocracy, authoritarianism, or a dictatorship.
We're living in times of kidnappings and gulags.
I mean, even our National Guard was federalized.
And the media has to meet the moment.
It feels like very few Democrats are stepping up to voice what this city is feeling.
I feel like for so long we have been the Dick Durbin party of impotence.
The question is, what are you going to do?
Hello again. Those were some of our friends, and one of our great, we have over a dozen Zeteo contributors, people like Naomi Klein, Greta Thunberg. You saw them there. I'm very blessed that they came on board to support me when I started this media company. I didn't really know what I was doing, but here we are over a year later. I didn't say before, because I'm so modest, but I'm going to do a bit of bragging now. We have over 400,000 subscribers globally. We have over 800,000 subscribers on YouTube. We've won awards, and forget the awards. You know how we're a real media company? We have merch. Right, so buy your merch. There's a discount on merch tonight, so get your merch for 10% off. And I should recognize, I don't know where he is in the audience, but Viet Thanh Nguyen, one of our contributors, is here tonight. Brilliant academic, Pulitzer Prize-winning author. We thank him for his contributions. And now, without any further ado, let's talk about what is happening at home, because it's as bad as what is happening abroad, I'm sorry to say to you all. We have a great panel to talk about what's happening here in LA, in fact, which has become the kind of epicenter of the Trump fascism and the resistance to that fascism. So to discuss all that tonight, I want you to welcome my good friend, YouTube star, host of his named show, and author of the New York Times bestseller Shameless, Brian Tyler Cohen. Also, LA City Council member of the Democratic Party, member of Democratic Socialists of America, a woman who, when she won her seat, it was called a political earthquake in LA, Nithya Raman. Thank you so much. Can you grab a seat? Or you can grab that. And last but certainly not least, if you are someone who watches CNN at 10 p.m. every night, number one, I pity you. Number two, I didn't have the greatest experience on that show. But number three, this man owns everyone on that show. He's a podcaster. He has a fantastic hat. He is the co-host of Higher Learning. Ladies and gentlemen, Van Lathan. So, where do we do the last Zeteo event? Let's do it in LA. Oh, that's not a very political city. It'll be quiet, we said 2 months ago when we planned to be here. And here we are. In fact, we're meeting, for people watching this at home later, we are meeting on a day, Nithya, I'm going to start with you, big political story, where ICE/CBP/DHS, some group of thugs, turned up at Dodger Stadium, I believe, and the Dodgers said no. How bad is it in LA right now?
Look, I think there is an incredible amount of fear right now. Incredible amount of fear. A staff member of mine saw someone being taken at a subway stop on their way to work yesterday. And it was horrifying. There, in this county, 1 million people are undocumented, which means there are probably a quarter of the families here are mixed status, which means that at every moment, I feel like there is fear for so many families here that this could happen to them. And the way in which it's happening is absolutely unprecedented. I mean, they're showing up at workplaces. They're showing up on street corners. They're showing up taking street vendors who are selling outside of a Home Depot, which is what they did this morning on Sunset Boulevard. They showed up outside of an elder care facility in Santa Monica and took workers from there. I mean, this is, these are kidnappings. And hundreds of people have been detained. They haven't been offered access to a lawyer. They haven't been able to speak to their families. And people are horrified, and I think there is daily fear coursing through this city.
Brian, when Nithya describes what we're seeing, that's fascism. People turning up at grocery stores, street vendors, elementary schools. They tried to get access to 2 elementary schools in the LA area. You and I had many conversations last year during the election campaign, I remember, both on camera and off. There were a lot of people who thought, you and me and others like me, we were fear-mongering.
Being alarmist.
Alarmist. This is hyperbole. How much of the American public now do you think is waking up and taking this stuff seriously? Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Look, I think if you took everything that Donald Trump was doing just in a vacuum, defying court orders, threatening to terminate the Constitution, disappearing people with no due process, threatening to suspend habeas corpus, if it was happening in another country, we wouldn't waste a single second. We would not hesitate for a single second to call it autocracy, authoritarianism, or a dictatorship. And yet, it's happening here, and so we, of course, have to do that, play that game where we pretend that it's not what it is. But the reality is that I think people more and more are waking up to it. It's our job to make sure that they know that just because it's happening here and we've become accustomed to the fact that we have democracy here does not mean that democracy tomorrow is guaranteed.
If this was happening in another country, the US would invade to liberate the people of that country. Van, in LA, there was a case recently of a Hispanic guy who was pulled, a viral video. He was a US citizen. He's like, I'm a citizen. He's screaming on the video. And they're picking him up and they're taking him. And the reason they're taking him is because he's a brown guy, right? That's the reality of where we are. Something else that the media has tiptoed around, and you know this, you do cable hits, you have these arguments. This is a white supremacist administration, right? This racism is running through all of these policies.
Yeah. I'm from way down south, Louisiana, right? South Louisiana. There you go. One person. And so my entire view of justice comes through the struggle of my present ancestors that I saw in front of me, and then the ones that were buried in my family cemetery and the stories that I heard. And when I see the things that they talked about, that they were so happy that they thought we were moving away from, be reintroduced into contemporary American culture, it's chilling. The belief that America has to exist through the lens of white male orthodoxy will be the thing that we either conquer in America or it'll be the thing to shred the country. And we have an opportunity to make a decision now, and I've never been more afraid that we're gonna make the wrong decision.
It's chilling to hear you say that. I was gonna try and lighten the mood and say, do you have to practice doing that to hold that up there?
You ever see Hell or High Water?
No.
Gotta see that. So at the end of the movie, Jeff Daniels comes in and he puts his hat on this thing, and I started doing that. I saw him do that in that movie.
It's very good. It's very good. It's going to keep us hopeful. Nithya, I got to ask the question that I asked Tommy Vita earlier tonight. Where are the Democrats? Where's Chuck Schumer? Where is Hakeem Jeffries? Where is Barack Obama? If Brian's saying, we know it's fascism, this is lawless stuff, at what point do we see tougher leadership from the party that is supposed to be the opposition?
Well, I feel like I experienced the Democratic Party in a strange way because I'm in LA. My only engagement with the party is in a city where even Republicans have to convert to being Democrats to get elected in this city. Like, there are multiple former Republicans, but they cannot be Republicans and win in LA. And so for me, I think the leadership of the Democratic Party, the way they talk about issues that I feel like are at the core of Los Angeles, it feels very foreign to what I feel like this city demands of its Democratic Party. And I will say at this moment, it feels like very few Democrats, except in brief moments, are speaking for this city. It feels like very few Democrats are stepping up to voice what this city is feeling at this moment.
How do you think your governor is doing?
I think he's confusing to me. He's very confusing. I appreciate his boldness in some ways in the last few days, but he's had some very odd guests on his podcast and rushed to agree with them in ways that I think are not reflective of most Californians. And I'm not sure why he's doing that.
Yeah, he's had his ups and downs, Gavin Newsom. He's having an up now, thanks to Donald Trump. Brian, you spend a lot of time with Democrats. They come on your show, they talk to you, they watch you. You have one of the biggest audience on YouTube when it comes to liberal politics. What advice are you giving them? When you're doing your monologues, when you're interviewing people, what do you want them to hear?
Fight, 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 fight. There is such a dearth, there is such an absence of an ability to fight. I feel like for so long we have been the Dick Durbin party of impotence on the left. And, you know, the best example I have is you look at the parliamentarian, and if something happens where we need some, you know, the reconciliation process is happening and we need to know if it can go through, and Democrats look to the parliamentarian and the parliamentarian says, I don't think this is gonna fall into the category of reconciliation. Democrats go, well, that's it. What could we possibly do now? And like the Republicans are like, when the same thing happens with the Republicans, they're like, fire the fucking parliamentarian, we'll get a new parliamentarian. Right now, they're doing the exact same thing. They're like,
which we predicted,
the
which you and I said would happen last year. When the Republicans get back, they're going to fire this person. Does anyone here know who the parliamentarian is?
Well, she's the most powerful person in the Democratic Party and persona non grata in the Republican Party. And so I think, going back to your initial question, it is to learn how to fight back. For so long, it has felt like Democrats are there to protect the processes of government as opposed to being there to serve people, to make sure that we have healthcare protected, climate change combated, that gun violence is reduced, all of the things that you actually run on. But once you get there, it feels so often like you're just there to protect these processes, to protect the filibuster, to protect the institution. And frankly, nobody gives a shit about the institution, and the institution is breaking at the hands of the Republican Party.
The people hate the institutions, and Harris ran on a joy pro-institution. People don't like institutions. Look, my position, I don't know if this is your position, is I'm on the left. I was a Bernie guy in 2016 and 2020. But right now, I don't think it matters whether you're on the left or the right. I think it only matters whether you have a spine and you're willing to speak out and willing to take a fight. Like, I don't care right now what your politics are. I just want someone to go out and call this shit out, right? There are masked agents grabbing American citizen kids off the street with cancer and kidnapping them and sending them abroad. Where is a party of opposition?
So one thing on that is we unfortunately don't have the luxury of being able to excommunicate people out of our party, and we know we have a very moderate wing of the Democratic Party and a very progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And the reality is that AOC is not going to be able to win in Jared Golden's district, and Jared Golden's not going to be able to win in AOC's district. And I think that's okay right now, as long as we just focus, to your exact point, on people who are actually willing to fight back against what we're seeing right now. This isn't a time to litigate like the likelihood of Medicare for all happening. As much as I would love to have that argument and to see it happen and to be able to make that, you know, what we're talking about right now in this election, we are so far past that with the way that the authoritarianism has crept into our politics right now, that everybody should be talking about what is happening in this country and what we can do to push back against it.
Yes, push back against especially what we're seeing in LA right now. Am I the only one who thinks it's absolutely insane and also weirdly hilarious that the people who screamed about not wanting to wear masks for 5 years are now wearing masks all the time, right? Absolutely, just gives me an ulcer. Van, let's talk about the media. You, I believe, deserve an award out of all the people here tonight because you share studio space with the most loathsome man on American TV, Scott Jennings, right? So awards to you for doing that, right? But what do you make of the media's coverage, mainstream media coverage of this historic moment? You said a moment ago, you've never been this afraid. You've seen American history. You've seen what happened to your family. You've seen what's happened in your lifetime, ups and downs, but this is a moment. How is the media meeting this moment?
Not well. Of all the things that are beholden to institutions, like Brian was saying, the media is probably the biggest one. I watch you, I watch everyone that's been up here in independent media, because to me, it brings me back to a point of sanity. I hear people talking about problems and talking about them with the type of energy that they deserve to be discussed. The media is, the legacy media right now is made to serve a commercial break. And so everything that happens has to be truncated and put into this little thing. I'm mad on the left, I'm mad on the right. I'm the host, you two stop fighting. We'll be right back, Procter & Gamble. we're not living in those times anymore. We're living in times of kidnappings and gulags. We're living in times of bodily autonomy being gone. We're living in genocidal times. We're living in times of blockades and starvations. And the media has to meet the moment. We're talking about the Democrats, but everybody wearing a suit and tie, getting all that makeup that breaks my skin out on your face, we have to meet the moment. And I have to meet the moment as a part of the media. So the answer is not good, but it's gonna start there to me with the narratives that are created to energize people and get us back on the road.
We hope we can get back on the road to sanity. Thank you for that endorsement of independent media. Hint, hint, subscribe to Zeteo. Nithya, you are on the front lines. You're an elected politician. You're a city council member in a city that is basically under assault right now from the federal government. I'm going to ask a question I ask a lot of my guests at the end of an interview. I'm going to ask it to you now. How do you keep hope alive? You mentioned seeing horrific things. Your assistant seeing people kidnapped at bus stops. How do you wake up every day and say, all right, I'm going to go out and fight again?
I think, at this moment, I feel like I don't have a good answer for that question. It's not easy, and particularly because right at this moment, it feels like so much of what's happening to Los Angeles is simply out of our control. We just don't have the tools, the laws, the institutions that can say, oh, this cannot happen here. I mean, even our National Guard was federalized. You know, even everything that is local has been really taken, those powers have been taken away from us. I think for me, the thing that I have been, this is somewhat wonky, but even as the federal government, so I chair the Housing and Homelessness Committee of the LA City Council. And one of the things that has kept me going over the last few days as I've watched the federal government, because while all this has been going on, they're also cutting HUD funding. They're cutting money for vouchers. They're cutting money for vouchers that are currently in Los Angeles, keeping about 6,000 people in the county in housing. And they're planning to not fund those anymore. What I'm grateful for in LA is that we have actually planned around and raised local revenues that can hopefully help to fill those gaps. And so for me, what I'm looking at is, what can I do as a local representative? What can I do as a resident of this city and this state with these revenue sources to make sure that I do the most to be able to protect the people that I'm able to protect in this city?
So it's a tough time, especially for local politicians. On the national stage, Brian, you're someone who follows this very closely. You know a lot of these people personally. The question that everyone's asking, even though we all agree you shouldn't ask it, but people can't help it in our culture, is horse race question, right? Who's going to be the guy or the woman who goes up against the next Republican candidate? Pray to God there's another Republican candidate. It's not Donald Trump running for term 3, which he hasn't ruled out. Who is that person? To go back to what we talked about earlier, what does that person need to look like? What kind of leader does quote unquote hashtag resistance need? Does the opposition need? Who does that person need to be? Because my view, I think that person doesn't just have to be a fighter, they have to be able to communicate, right? To get through. Harris, the whole question was, why didn't Kamala Harris go on Joe Rogan? My thing was, if she'd gone on Joe Rogan, it would have been a disaster regardless, because she wasn't a great communicator. We saw that in the few interviews she did. So what does that person need to look like? I often think like the next Democratic presidential candidate needs to be someone who can do a bit of bullshitting, right? I think the Democrats need someone who can match the GOP a bit of bullshitting, because we've had, the Republicans are like, we're going to invade Greenland, and the Democrats are like, we're going to give you childcare, and here's our 16,000-page policy proposal. And it's not the same thing, right? So you need someone who's going to go up and say, yeah, we're going to raise the minimum wage, it's going to be amazing.
I think something that has plagued the Democrats is we are so careful to make sure that our message is safe, unoffensive, perfectly crafted, poll tested, and don't do too many interviews, because if God forbid something goes wrong, then that's gonna envelop all of the coverage. And so a la Kamala Harris, you do just a couple of interviews, and then if you do say something wrong, because there's been so few, and because you're so precious with those interviews, then that becomes a big scandal. And so instead of doing what Donald Trump has done so well over the years, which is just bombarding us with bullshit to the point where even if he says something batshit crazy yesterday, by tomorrow everybody's forgotten it because he said something else batshit crazy, the Democrats will make sure that we're just so safe and okay, if I've made a mistake, then I have to retreat back into my cocoon for 5 days, not recognizing that, okay, if you've given us nothing new, we're gonna keep talking about that thing that you've done. When Kamala Harris was asked what she would do different from Joe Biden and said nothing, and then didn't do another interview for a week, didn't show up for another week, what else are we gonna talk about? Because she's done nothing to get our attention. So, going back to your question.
Someone who can command attention.
Someone who can command attention, someone who's willing to, and someone who understands the media environment that we're living in. I think there are a few people who've shown, there's some weird names I'm gonna throw out, but there are some people who understand the media environment and how to play in this media environment. I don't know what I legitimately don't know a single policy position of Stephen A. Smith, but I know that he knows how to command the media environment. I don't know what that guy stands for. I don't know if he's left, right, or center, but he knows how to get attention.
That's an abomination.
And I understand. Politics notwithstanding. I've seen the ways in which...
Brian had the whole room in the palm of his hand. And then he went, Stephen A. Smith.
With the throat clearing, I don't know anything about his politics. I do think that watching the ways in which Pete Buttigieg has been able to go on right-wing platforms has been impressive, and the ways in which he's been able to go on Fox News has been impressive. I think we need people who are not afraid to go into spaces that Democrats are generally afraid of. We lost the popular vote, we lost the electoral vote, and so we don't have the luxury of being able to stay in the protective warmth of our cocoon. We can't just go on MSNBC and expect to win the next election. Inherently, we have to go to places that we're not comfortable with, reach out to those people, and make the case to bring them back in. And so it has to be, I don't really know any names at this point of who it's gonna be, and frankly, if we had asked prior to the 2008 election, if you said, who would it be? I think the last name most people would say is Barack Obama, as Hillary Clinton was being anointed.
It changes by the week. As Nithya said, Gavin Newsom was hated by the base for yucking it up with Steve Bannon. Then he's suddenly loved because he's quote tweeting Trump. Cory Booker was loved for standing up for 20 hours. Then he was voting for Jared Kushner's dad to be ambassador to France and voting for weapons to Israel. Then he was hated.
Yeah.
So
things move way too quickly
we're going to go to the
audience,
but I got to bring you in. You're not a Stephen A. Smith fan.
I'm a big fan of him
on sports TV
talking about RAM screens and all of that stuff like that for the NBA, but I don't think I need him running the country.
Okay, no more celebrity presidents. If you've got questions about anything we've talked about or more, please head out. We've got 2 microphones here at the front. We've got 2 microphones at the back. If you want to ask our panel about what's going on, yes.
Hi, my name is Suma Amber. I'm a Lebanese American journalist. I have a channel that's called Politically Very Incorrect. And I have a couple of questions.
Just one.
Only one.
Go on.
All right, so did we need somebody like Trump to come out in the open to be a president so that we can identify as Americans our shortcomings?
Interesting.
That's number one.
That's a good one. I think that's good.
All right, thank you so much.
Who wants to take that question? Do we need a Trump to show our own shortcomings to us?
I used to think that we did. I think differently now because he didn't just show our shortcomings. He was steroids for them. So he reinforced, he codified a lot of people's beliefs. So it wasn't just showing them, he created new monsters. So I think it was a net negative, a loss. Obviously, Donald Trump sucks.
Let's go here.
Is this on?
Yes.
Independent journalist. Thank you for holding this panel. This question is to Councilwoman Raman. Thank you for your words. What do you have to say to those independent journalists and credentialed journalists who have been attacked and used excessive force on by our LAPD while covering these peaceful protests? Many of them have been shot in the knee, many have been shot in the face. So that's one.
We're only doing one question. Okay, very quick.
And this resembles, we were not allowed into areas that we are by law allowed to go in and cover. It's just like Gaza, where independent and international journalists are not allowed in. So what is your message to those journalists who have been attacking tear gas?
Look, I think this isn't the first time that we've seen challenges with LAPD and how they've responded to journalists. I think during the Echo Park Lake event, 25%, when Echo Park was cleared of all those tents and there were lots of protests, 25% of all journalist arrests in America that year were that night, right here in LA, right? So this is a pattern that we've had in Los Angeles. And I will say that so as a council member, you don't have direct operational control over LAPD, right? They have the police commission, they have the mayor that they respond to, and then they have their police chief. And after each of these moments, even sometimes during these moments, I have spoken out publicly about these issues, or I've used other tools that are available to me to try and hold LAPD accountable for improvements, for changes. But I can tell you that right now, I feel like the lessons from Echo Park, which we did an after-action report on. We instituted new training programs. We were supposed to have new protocols in place. We were supposed to have new ways of giving commands out in the field that would have changed these issues. It did not seem to have translated into what happened on the ground, and we have to work harder to fix it. So I'm sorry for what you experienced.
Okay, thank you for that question. We're going to get a gentleman up there, and then we'll go to the lady over there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we've been rightfully focusing on the federal overreach, the dimensions of what's been going on with ICE, and we understand that LA carries itself as a sanctuary city. But how are we meant to believe such a label when opposition to ICE's overreach is met with violent repression by LA's own cops?
Okay, so.
And what can we do to ensure that such a title, sanctuary city, is actually meaningful?
Okay, great question. I'm gonna take three at a time now because we're short on time, so we'll take this next question. Yep.
I hope I'm not putting anything down, but so back to what you were talking about before. I'm a little bit jaded with it because I keep thinking, who's gonna, it's possible, right? I think Barack Obama won in part because he was sort of unknown. He didn't have all the baggage that Hillary, Elizabeth Warren. I mean, AOC's not gonna do it. Bernie's not gonna do it.
AOC might do it, but yeah.
What?
AOC might run.
Well, yeah, but she won't win. I mean.
Well, if you act like that, then nobody's going to win, are they? Okay, you have a question?
Yeah, you said no speeches, so why not? Because there's too much against her. So Barack Obama didn't have.
Okay, but you have a question? Question.
What do you think of Ted Lieu?
What do you think of who?
Ted Lieu.
I can't hear. Ted Lieu. Okay, I'm going to let Brian take that one. What do you think of Ted Lieu?
Because I think he's media savvy.
Look, I think that the next candidate for president is going to be somebody who's going to be able to spar a la Trump, right? And there are some names that are popping. The names that are floating around. If I had to pick names right now that are legitimate contenders, there is the Pete Buttigieg's of the world. There is Gavin Newsom, obviously interested in running. Wes Moore is a name that I think, to your exact point, doesn't have the baggage that these other candidates have. Obviously, Newsom has a ton of baggage as it relates to California. He's the boogeyman for these Republicans. Pete Buttigieg was in the Biden administration. There is baggage that comes with that. So everybody's going to have something. Somebody who I think is relatively clean in this space and unknown is Wes Moore somebody worth looking at.
Okay, Nithya, Sanctuary City. Question. How does LA keep its title, and especially when some cops are going along with ICE agents?
Well, he was asking about cops' relationship to protesters, and I would say the same thing that we were saying before. I mean, I think accountability for LAPD remains an enormous issue. We're using the tools that we have. My tools are limited, but we are pushing, and I just want to say that it's not that elected representatives in Los Angeles are looking at what's happening and saying, this is okay. I think we know we need to do better as a city.
Okay, gentleman here and then lady up there. We'll take two at a time because we're running out of time. We need to get to our final segment.
Sorry, this is another question about LAPD and the Sheriff's Department. My question is, when we're in an environment where immigrants are afraid to go to parks, afraid to go to grocery stores, LAPD and the Sheriff's Department is supposed to serve us. Yeah. Why can't we order LAPD and the Sheriff's Department to run interference and follow ICE and protect people that
Yeah, we have asked these exact same questions were asked to LAPD by our city leadership. We are unable to, the LAPD and any local law enforcement is not able to obstruct enforcement actions by other federal agencies. This is just, if we do that, they will be arrested. They will be the target of enforcement actions themselves. These are not, I know.
By the way, we're talking about who's going to run in 2028. I'll tell you what, I don't care who runs in 2028, but if they don't run on a campaign of getting rid of ICE, they don't deserve to win. Lady here.
Quick question. Hi, quick question. Are you recruiting Terry Moran?
Am I recruiting Terry Moran?
Yes.
Not yet, but we do enjoy all the people joining Substack. It is an interesting time. When I joined Substack, and Brian remembers this because I chatted to him about it at the time after I left MSNBC, and he's one of these pioneers of independent media. Give it up for Brian. He was doing it before a lot of people. But when I joined Substack, Substack wasn't in the same position. I think it's fair to say it is a year later. I would like to say we were first movers on the liberal left progressive side of things. It was a very right-wing place, Substack. And now, whenever someone leaves independent mainstream media, straight away, it's Joy Reid, my good friend, it's Jim Acosta, it's Terry Moran. It's an interesting time where mainstream media is getting rid of people who are actually super popular. I think Jim Acosta proved that. I think he's making more money than most of his former CNN colleagues were now as an independent journalist. So it is a little bit of a FU to mainstream media when they get rid of these people. I mean, Terry Moran, good luck to him. They got rid of him because he said the truth about Stephen Miller, California's worst export to the rest of the United States of America. One thing I would say, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, I say this in the spirit of media, like, I was very, very disappointed with Terry Moran's interview with Donald Trump that he did, where Donald Trump said, do you remember that ridiculous thing where he said, he has MS-13 on his knuckles? No, they're there. And Terry Moran was like, oh, let's agree to disagree. You cannot agree to disagree on facts. That is where journalism fails us. You cannot do that. All right, we're going to wrap up. Last two questions down here very quickly. We'll take very brief questions, brief answers.
Hi,
Yes.
my name is Sarah. This past weekend, we saw one of the largest protests against ICE raids and also the current admin,
Yes,
modern
no
US
kings.
history, and Indian international. So how would you see a constructive way to direct and carry momentum moving forward as a whole?
Great question. And yes, here?
I mean, mine's the same, right? Like, what even is, we talk about where are the Democrats? What is even the stance on ICE and immigration at this point? Like, we've seen Mayor Brandon Johnson mobilize CPD against ICE agents. Why can't Karen Bass do that same thing?
All right, very briefly, can Karen Bass do that?
I don't think, I mean, I haven't seen Mayor Brandon Johnson, but I would just say that I don't know if Karen Bass can do that.
Good topic for the next city council meeting.
Exactly.
There we go. Zeteo audience members can get some topics into the next council meeting. Brian and Van, I'm going to give you the last words on this. Great question here about momentum. I know you were covering a lot of the protests on Saturday. Where do you think it goes next? How do you keep that momentum up?
I think we do more of that, because I think there are a lot of instances where Donald Trump is able to show that he can usurp power. Obviously, Republicans control the House, the Senate, the White House, and so all we have, and the most important thing we have, and the most powerful thing there is these massive uprisings where we have hundreds of thousands or millions upon millions of people taking to the streets. That is the only thing that's going to dwarf the optics of power that Donald Trump has. I think so much of Trump's power is derived from this idea that that he can quash all dissent and that he has total fealty. And
self-fulfilling prophecy.
And exactly. And when we're able to send millions upon millions of people into the streets, there was 2,100 protests for No King's Day. When we're able to send millions upon millions of people to the streets, that explodes this illusion that Donald Trump is all powerful. And that also helps us win culture moving forward. It's not going to happen in one fell swoop, but when you open up your Instagram and your TikTok, and instead of seeing bullshit pro-Republican content, you see tons of people out there, and by the way, I saw people who were perfectly content to post right-wing content in the lead up to the election, suddenly showing up with their signs at this No King's Day protest. So culture isn't won in one fell swoop, but it's won slowly, and it's won by doing events like this.
Well said. Van, last word.
At the end of the day, it's your country. It is. I went through my anarchist phase, and I was telling this, America's not my country, I'm not a part of this. My grandfather looked and he said, well, that's disrespectful to all of the black people that got fire hoses turned on him, so you could say that. So the reality is it's your country. The Democrats are going to write strongly worded letters.
They're not actually even that strongly worded, to be honest.
Right.
Even the letters are pretty weak.
Right, so they're going to do that. The question is, what are you going to do?
Well said. What are you going to do? Ladies and gentlemen, Lathan, Brian Tyler Cohen, Nithya Raman. Thank you. Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.